The day's action here on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit for the second 25-minute race of the day, the 6th round of the 2021 Championship. The race earlier on today was pretty entertaining, actually. Was won by Jack Bartholomew, and he'll be looking to get his third win on the bounce in this one. Track temperature the highest it's been all day, 22 degrees, despite the blanket of grey cloud above us since the moment we got here this morning. It's not really rained yet, and so I'm hopeful we'll get through this last 25 minutes or so of track action without the heavens deciding to open. The cars are out on the track, not on their green flag lap. They're on their way from the assembly area, which is behind the pits here at Silverstone, round to the grid, and then they'll get themselves lined up, go out on the green flag lap, and we'll be away and racing. So Bartholomew won the earlier race then by 2.2 seconds. From Theo Edgerton's second. Edgerton was with him for much of the early part of the race, and then in the second half, Bartholomew just seemed to get away a little bit. Ethan Hawkey had a kind of similar situation with Charles Clark for third. The big battle really involved the AM class leader, Ambrogio Perfetti, who was actually dicing with Matthew Armstrong for 5th position overall. Armstrong being a pro driver, Perfetti an AM. And it was a terrific battle between the two, but as they diced, Ian Humphries, who had won every AM race so far this year, was closing in on them, and had the race been a lap or two longer, he might just have been able to challenge Perfetti for the win. As it was, though, Ambrogio took the AM victory from Humphries second and Nigel Rice in third. All of this means that in the championship, Theo Edgerton has still got the championship lead on 51 points. He's 16 points clear of Jack Bartholomew second, and third Ethan Hawkey. In fact, their joint second, I should say, are Bartholomew and Hawkey. Then Matthew Armstrong fourth and Charles Clark fifth, just 2 points further back. In the AM class, Humphries still has a 21-point lead over Nigel Rice. Pete Chambers is 4 points further back in third, and 6 points now ahead of race one winner Ambrogio Perfetti. There's Theo Edgerton at the wheel of the car that will start second on the grid, and Edgerton, who got a good start in the previous race, but not quite as good as Jack Bartholomew, snuck through on the inside. Ethan Hawkey almost went round the outside as well. It was a very dramatic opening half a lap or so, and I'm sure we'll see a similar thing here, because track position will be important. You can overtake around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, but in identical cars and with very evenly matched drivers, can be tricky to make the progress that you really want to make. So getting through at the start of the race, especially in the pro class, I would imagine, is going to be really essential to getting a good result. So Bartholomew then will be on the right, the white and green car. On the left, the white, black, yellow and blue machine of Theo Edgerton, second-year racer in the championship. So is Ethan Hawkey in the all-white car that starts third, and then the sort of Rothman's liveried 77 car there on the inside of row 2 is Charles Clark. Here's the grid then: Bartholomew for Redline Racing and Theo Edgerton for TCR on the front row of the grid. Then Ethan Hawkey, Team Parker Racing, and Charles Clark in 2 Racing, 4 different teams represented across the front 2 rows of the grid. Then it's another Team Parker car, Matthew Armstrong 5th, and then the AM pole sitter, Ambrogio Perfetti for In2 Racing. Ian Humphries for Valuga and Nigel Rice are next. Humphries and Carl Cavers, his teammate, were working well together in the last race. Cavers lines up 9th on the grid with Alexei Maliakin, who had a really good start in race 1, actually. He was up there battling for second place for much of the race. At times it got a bit close, actually, out on track with him. Pete Chambers is next with, at the back of the grid, Charles March. Having non-finished, he has to start behind the AM cars. It's not like some classes where the pros and the AMs are split on the grid. Here, they all run together, they all start together, they race together, but you only score points within your class. So if you're 5th on the road, but the car ahead of you, or the car behind you, I should say, is a pro driver and you're an AM, you can let them go and it won't make any difference for your points haul for the race. So really good looking cars, these. Shame there aren't more of them out there, but hopefully the interest is being drummed up, because I think it's a great little series, this, and one that does, as I said in race 1, really provide a nice stepping stone on the GT racing ladder, be that for up-and-coming pros and also up-and-coming AM drivers, because for a long time, really, if you were an AM driver and you wanted to go GT racing, sort of had to just jump straight in at the deep end and, you know, get yourself a GT4 team maybe that would run you and get yourself a quick pro to race with. Whereas now there are a couple of series like this one that allow you to do a bit of GT4 racing, basically, without actually having to jump straight into something like British GT. And you can imagine that if you're doing well in either the Pro or the AM class of this championship, that would probably mean that you'd do all right in British GT as well. Got a glimpse there of the BRDC clubhouse, where there were a couple of Into Racing supporters, I noticed, who will be cheering on the Into drivers, Alexei Malikin and Ambrogio Perfetti, and Charles Clark, actually, all of them running in the AM class. Now the cars weave their way down the Wellington Straight then towards Brooklands Corner, ahead of what is set to be the final race of the day here, the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. It's also, of course, a step on the Porsche racing ladder, kind of the entry-level Porsche series. Could potentially transition from this up into Porsche Carrera Cup GB and then on to Porsche Super Cup over in Europe, supporting the Formula One circus. And then from there, maybe into the Porsche factory GT ranks. Certainly people like Jack Bartholomew, Theo Edgerton, they'll be thinking along those lines. Get in with a manufacturer at this level and really impress them, then that can take you places. Just ask Harry King, Porsche scholarship winner a couple of years ago, then made all the headlines in Carrera Cup last year and is continuing to be competitive in that championship again, and it seems almost certain that he will continue to move up the ladder with Porsche, and you never know, a factory drive could beckon. Could we see some of these drivers, particularly amongst the pros, follow a similar career path? Well, the next step on that journey is this 6th round of the championship, and with Jack Bartholomew on the pole, Theo Edgerton alongside him. It's going to be an entertaining scrap between the two of them. Also, remember, the AM battle behind will be pretty entertaining as well then. Green flag waved for the final time from the back of the grid. And let's go racing then in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain here at Silverstone. Jack Bartholomew on the outside going into turn 1, does not get such a good start. It's Edgerton that's away best this time from the inside of row 1. And he's got the inside for Copse Corner, so Edgerton will go through into the lead. So Bartholomew immediately drops down to 2nd place. 3rd place is still Ethan Hawkey, but that was not in the script, that, for Jack Bartholomew, who is going to have work now to do to try and get back ahead of Edgerton for the lead. The three of them go through Maggots and Beckett's for the first time. In the AM category, that is not Perfetti leading the way. I think it's Ian Humphries ahead. Oh, there's contact. That's Charles Clark and Matthew Armstrong. Armstrong was at the inside there in the lighter coloured car. The white and dark blue machine of Clark unfortunately goes for a spectacular spin, and that means that just 3 of the pros now remain at the very front of the field, although those two hopefully will rejoin at the back. There goes Ian Humphries leading in AM, ahead of Perfetti and Nigel Rice 2nd and 3rd, and then into Stowe Corner comes the 22 of Carl Cavers, dicing away with Pete Chambers, who's got ahead of him on the grid. So in the background we can see Matthew Armstrong still going. Did Charles Clark get back underway? It's a common place to see contact, that, through the right-hander, because you come out of Beckett's quickly, then through the next left-hander, and if you get a really good run there, you can sort of carry that momentum up the inside, but it almost always ends in contact, because the car you're passing probably hasn't seen you coming, and that appears to be what happened on that occasion. So Bartholomew 2nd then, but now Ethan Hawkey's up the inside into the loop. That could end in contact if they're not careful. They just avoid it. But look at the time they're losing to Edgerton. 8/10 of a second at the end of the opening sector. Edgerton is gone, hasn't he? So Theo trying to do what he couldn't do in the previous race, which was get the lead at the start and then disappear up the road. But Edgerton was quicker in qualifying. Initially, Ambrogio Perfetti, big moment. Same is true of Ethan Hawkey. They're all scrabbling for grip a bit here on perhaps slightly cold tyres here at the start of the race. Through Luffield they go. Number 7 there going through. That's Charles March. He's he's marched his way through the order, hasn't he? Although he's a pro driver up against the AMs around him. Yeah, no, tell a lie, sorry. Charles is an AM driver, so that's all for position then in the black car with the yellow highlights. So Edgerton leads the first lap by 1.5 seconds. Bartholomew second, Hawkey third, with Ian Humphries leading the AM class in fourth, but only 0.6 of a second behind him. Clark is heading into the pit lane. Armstrong did get going again, but is some way behind, so I wonder if he's got maybe some steering or suspension damage. That's a shame to lose a couple of cars there. The drivers have hung around all day and unfortunately aren't going to get much of a race in. That's, in fact, that is Armstrong, sorry. It's, yeah, Clark that has not got going again after the incident, it would seem. So Armstrong with, we guess, steering or suspension damage on the front left corner. Clark's car, we hope, is pulled into a safe area, so we don't need a safety car. The rest of the field then comes down through Club for the second time. The sectors this time, Bartholomew coming back a little bit now at Edgerton, 0.2 quicker in Sector 1. There you can see he's getting away from Hawkey, isn't he? The white and green car in second place. Is he going to be able to close in on the race leader, though? Middle sector, well, suggests it's going to be tight because he's only 4/1000ths quicker than Edgerton in Sector 2. And Hawkey is actually quicker than the pair of them in third. So those three matching each other 10th for 10th at the moment. Brilliant livery, isn't it, on that number 7 car with the jaws around the front of the car, baring its teeth at those in front. This is a replay of the start then. So into the first corner, great start made there on the inside from Theo Edgerton. There was almost contact as Bartholomew tried to get over to defend, couldn't get there though, and so Edgerton managed to force it. There might have even just been a little love tap there, but no real damage done. And then, of course, Bartholomew's attention turned very quickly from attack to defence as he tried to keep Hawkey at bay. And then I wonder if we can see a replay of the Armstrong-Clark. Oh, well, yes. They weren't really side by side, which were they? Armstrong was having a bit of a stab at it, but I wonder if maybe even outbraked himself a little bit there. That was definitely not something you can pin on Charles Clark. So, race continues into its third lap then. Fastest lap set by Edgerton, but only a couple of hundredths quicker than Bartholomew, so the gap actually stays at half a second, despite the fact Bartholomew, as I said, was that couple of tenths quicker in Sector 1. Through the field go, all reasonably well spaced out. The closest pair at the moment are Ian Humphries in the AM lead and Ambrogio Perfetti second, but they're still 0.8 apart. Everyone keeping their distance now after the slightly dramatic opening lap. But in a 25-minute race, it's always the case that the gaps can ebb and flow, and those that look after their tyres the best are the ones that come on stronger in the second half of the race. So we could still see some challenges sort of appearing in the second half of the race. We're already more than 5 minutes in, of course. It's a long lap. 2:10 was the lap time set by the leaders that time. There go the leading two, or leading three, out onto the back straight, and there in the background is the AM class battle. Perfetti is closing in on Humphries here. He was fractionally quicker in Sector 1, but then he was a quarter of a second faster in Sector 2, so Ambrogio Perfetti is going after the AM leader. Perfetti broke this run of 4 victories on the trot for Humphries in the championship, although it looked as though maybe that might change on the final lap. Again, a great livery there, the Chupa Chups sponsorship, that being the family company for Perfetti. But, it is a unique livery, a distinctive one. You know it's him, even from a distance, and he's trying to get past that Beluga car ahead. And it looks as though he's quicker at this stage of the race, doesn't he? But is that Humphries maybe managing the tyres through Brooklands? Slightly wider line there for Humphries. Armstrong's car still being worked on. You can see the scuff mark on the left front corner. As here, there could be an overlap maybe for Perfetti as he comes out of Luffield corner. Yes, he's got himself at the inside of Ian Humphries, who tries to close the door now through Woodcote corner and should be able to. Yep, he's cleared Ambrogio Perfetti and holds on to the AM lead. Perfetti indicating there to the right as he tried to pull out to pass. That's, I don't know whether he knocked the indicator on by mistake or whether that was a ploy. He's switched it off again now just to try and, I don't know, tap into a bit of autopilot there for Humphries. When you see an indicator in your mirror, you tend to take notice and stay out of the way, but it didn't work. Humphries, rightly so, defending his lead here. Perfetti, of course, not yet back into second in the championship, is he? He is 4th in the championship, 10 points behind Nigel Rice, who is second, and 6 points behind Pete Chambers, who is third. Well, Chambers is running 7th in class at the moment, and Nigel Rice is running 3rd, so Perfetti's going to gain some points on Chambers, but not really on Rice. Could gain 3rd place, though, couldn't he, in the championship, but can he gain 1st place in the race? As he tries to get past Humphries through Club. Got a good run through the left-hander, quicker into the right. Humphries is out over the curb, but that actually just gives him a wider line then into the second part of the corner. Windscreen wiper on there, briefly for Humphries. I did see a few spots of water on the camera at Beckett's that time, I think. The weather does, or the wind is blowing from that sort of Stowe Beckett's direction. Yeah, there's some rain on the comms box window as well, so not torrential by any stretch, but it's just getting a bit greasy out there. Perfetti up the inside into the loop. That's a committed move, a brilliant move. There was a bit of cooperation involved from Humphries as well, who didn't want to turn in and risk contact. Humphries is, as I've said, the comfortable points leader in the AM Class. He can afford to finish 2nd in this one and still have a healthy points lead. That was a really, really nice overtake, though, there on the inside line through the loop. Which was added to the circuit more than 10 years ago now to promote exactly that kind of racing. The lead gap, by the way, between Edgerton and Bartholomew came down to 1.3 seconds on the previous lap, so a couple of tenths quicker was Edgerton, and this time he's a couple of tenths slower, so back up to 1.5 seconds exactly now between the top 2 drivers. Hawkey is a further 3 seconds back in 3rd, so we're not missing anything at the front of the field now. It's down into Maggots and Beckett's they go. 5th time of asking, nearly 10 minutes now into this 25-minute race. We got how many laps in race 1? It was a 12-lapper in race 1. Don't think there were any safety cars there, were there? A couple of drivers got penalties in that race as well for exceeding track limits. Nigel Rice did, and so of course did Theo Edgerton, who won on the road, and Bartholomew inherited the victory in the first race of the day. Through Stowe Corner goes Ethan Hawkey. And in the sectors, again, he's just not quite able to live with Edgerton and Bartholomew there, both in the high 39s in sector 1. He's at mid-40, 3/4 of a second slower than them through Copse, Maggots and Beckett. The first sector ends partway down the Hanger Straight. The second sector ends at that line there, coming out of the final corner past the Formula 1 pits in the Silverstone wing. Sector 3 then ends down the Wellington Straight, and of course Sector 4 at the start-finish line, this being a 3.66-mile circuit. They have 4 sectors rather than 3. Through the loop again. Traction crucial out of there. Bartholomew, by the way, in the first sector was 2 tenths slower than Edgerton, so we're getting a repeat here, I think, of what we saw in the previous race. Edgerton getting away through the middle part of the race, but will he exceed track limits again? That's what he did in the previous race. It cost him the victory. And cost him crucial championship points for Jack Bartholomew as well. There you can see the gap. Edgerton's best lap isn't a lot quicker than Bartholomew's, only 19 1,000th in his previous lap, over a tenth faster. Across the line they go then. Back to Copse Corner, 14 minutes left in this race. Again, windscreen wipers just flashing on and off as they get a little bit of psychological rain on the windscreen. Not enough to make the track slippery, but just enough to catch your attention as a driver, make you think that maybe it might be slippery. We've got the AM leaders there, Perfetti and Humphries, Rice and March. That could become a battle, couldn't it, actually? Although, no, March was slower on the previous lap by 3 tenths. And Carl Cavers is 2.3 seconds further back, 2.1 ahead of Alexei Maliakin. And there, Pete Chambers, who's had a good season, actually, so far. A couple of podiums. 3rd in the championship coming into this race in the AM category. But as we've said, only these 6 points ahead of Perfetti. And Chambers just hasn't clicked with the Silverstone circuit for whatever reason. So this man, not this man, but the man we just saw, Ambrogio Perfetti, looks as though he is going to move potentially into that 2nd place in the AM Championship after this race. Bartholomew makes his way through Club Corner. Tyre wear now starting to become a little bit of a factor as we get deeper into the race now. And towards the part of the race where those that have looked after their tyres the best might now start to reap the rewards of that. So leading the way then, Theo Edgerton, who, as I said, raced in the championship last year for TCR. And was actually third in points in 2020, Theo Edgerton. Had himself a handful of podiums throughout the course of the year. Jack Bartholomew, meanwhile, has done GT racing in the last few years, racing in Lamborghinis predominantly over in Asia and the UAE. Actually was winner in the Super Trofeo Asia and UAE Championship in 2018, third in the European Lamborghini Super Trofeo last year. And of course, former runner in British GT in the GT4 category, where he finished second in the championship. Also did single-seaters with British Formula 4 before that. So Bartholomew with arguably a more extensive CV than Theo. But Theo Edgerton definitely having the edge here this particular weekend. Hawkey behind them. Also a relative newcomer to racing now. We're getting the track limits warnings coming in now. Number 27, Ian Humphries, being given a black and white warning flag for exceeding track limits. So not a penalty yet, but if he does it again, he could find himself in spot trouble. There is Alexei Maliakin in the slightly battered 23 car after his contact that he had in the previous race. There's Ian Humphries then, dominant man in the AM category, the man from Rochdale in the northwest, racing for Veluga, chasing after Ambrogio Perfetti, who just seems to have an answer for him at the moment, doesn't he? It's a second and a half between the two, and actually Perfetti was a full 6/10 quicker on the previous lap. Perfetti we've seen doing a lot of historic racing in recent years. Won races at the likes of the Donington Historic Masters, racing the Goodwood Revival as well. Perfetti, a good driver actually, and an adaptable driver too, able to jump from one car to the other. That's actually something that historic drivers do typically do pretty well with, because they don't tend to just stick to one category. They might go from sports cars, touring cars, GT cars, single-seaters, all in the same day sometimes. It's why quite a lot of professional racing drivers these days are getting back into the historic racing scene, because it's a great way actually of honing your natural car control skills and sort of learning how to adapt to very different cars. All the cars in this championship though are exactly the same. Porsche Caymans, which are making their second season of racing now. Based on the GT4 Cayman, and that's why it does make it a great sort of stepping stone, as I said, on this GT racing ladder. Down into Stowe then heads Ethan Hawkey. Hawkey racing for Team Parker Racing, of course, very, very well-known team, and particularly for Porsche exploits. Barry Horn, the team manager, fielding 4 drivers in total, but Kurt Leimer is not here this weekend. Ethan Hawkey is one of those, though. Team Parker Racing with so much success in Porsche competition, and in GT racing, even running Porsches once more now in the British GT Championship, having briefly made the switch to Bentley for a year or two. Well, for a handful of years, I suppose, but back to their more traditional Porsches now. Edgerton races for the Total Control Racing Squad, TCR for short, run by Lee Brooks. Very successful racing driver in his day as well, and he's the only TCR driver in this field, but TCR are also fielding cars in other categories this weekend, Ginetta GT5s to be precise. So Theo Edgerton may have a big lead here, 3 seconds up the road, but he's still pushing. Look at that for car control, and look at that for camera work as well. Well caught, that little slide going out of Village. And Edgerton, he's pushing hard, but you'd have thought he'd have learned from his penalty in race 1, wouldn't you, really? He's got this big lead, doesn't need to be pushing this hard. He hasn't yet been shown a warning flag, I suppose, though. I suppose if that were to happen, he might choose to take things a little easier. Right, this is a battle. This is Carl Cavers and Alexei Malyakin for 5th place in the AM category then, 8th place overall. This gap came down by, well, half a tenth on the previous lap, but Malyakin has caught him again on this lap. The gap at the start of it was 6.5 tenths, and at the end of it, it's 5 tenths. Comes down by 1.5 then. And they're actually not that far behind Charles March, are they? March, yeah, a bit of a slow lap that time, half a second, 6 tenths slower than them. So for 4th, 5th and 6th in the AM category, it could all come alive here in the final third of the race. We've got 6.5 minutes or so to go through the Maggots-Beckett sequence. They go again. There are the leaders in AM, still Perfetti ahead of Humphries, although Humphries put in a personal best on the previous lap, a 2:12.2, which was 7 tenths, just over 7 tenths quicker than Perfetti. Now, was that a mistake for Perfetti? It wasn't a terrible lap, actually. Perfetti was only 3 tenths off his previous best. That's actually closer to his previous best pace than the pro drivers are running at the moment. So it was just a really good effort, that, from Humphries, who maybe, as I said at the start, didn't I, that maybe he was saving his tyres, and maybe that's what we're seeing now. Here comes Edgerton. Sideways again. No, he keeps it neat and tidy this time out of Village. 3.2 seconds the gap now. He was another 3 tenths nearly quicker than Bartholomew last time. This lap he's taken another couple of... no, in fact, Bartholomew 2 tenths quicker than him in the middle sector. I'd love to know why Theo does this. I've noticed he's been doing this all race. He comes out of Aintree and then weaves right over to the middle of the road. Bartholomew in the background was doing the same thing. I don't really understand why. The racing line would mean that you'd want to really stay on the same side of the road, surely. Malyakin, meanwhile, is going whichever side of the road that Carl Cavers isn't, because Cavers is really defending now in the Faluga car, and he picks up the throttle too early out of the loop. Up the inside goes Malyakin, and he's going to go through. So Alexei Malyakin into 8th place overall, 5th place in the AM category. Now, can he catch Charles March? He's a second behind, but his pace over recent laps would suggest that maybe he can. Running out of time, of course, only 5 minutes left on the clock, but that is not a big gap, and Malyakin does seem to be looking, does seem to be coming on stronger here at the end of the race, doesn't he? Perfetti to Humphries, by the way, is under 6 tenths as well now. So for the lead of the AM class, things are tightening up nicely, because on the previous lap, it was another 4 tenths quicker for Humphries. So a race that's been quiet up until this point is all of a sudden starting to look rather tasty. Here we go, look, Humphries and Perfetti almost nose to tail now. You do see this sometimes from Ambrogio. He's quick at the start of the race, but then sometimes fades a bit towards the end. I don't know if that's because he's hard on his tyres or just, I don't know, gets to the end of the race and starts to lose concentration a bit. But he held on to the victory in race 1. Let's see if he can do the same now. The second race. Down through the Vale, which is the dip. Club is actually the left and right-handers, I was told once, so a lot of people call the left-hander there Vale, but I believe it's not. It is the Club chicane, basically, now, and then into the second part of the Club there, which brings you out onto the new pit straight. And Humphries now starting to size up Ambrogio Perfetti. They're going to have 2 more laps after this one, so he's got time to pick his moment here, but those 2 laps, 2.5 laps will disappear pretty quickly. Looks from the inside, does he into Village? Not close enough. So Perfetti keeps the position, but he's defending now into a lot of these braking zones. That's going to slow him down on the exit. That's only going to help Humphries build a bit of a momentum and maybe have a go into the next braking zone, which is down at Brooklands. Tries to get a bit of a slipstream, although you won't get a huge amount of a tow in these cars. Quite a sleek shape, aren't they? The Porsche Cayman Club Sport GT4. Over the curbs, much tighter, neater line from Humphries. Perfetti just starting to make a few mistakes. The more pressure that Humphries puts him under, of course, the more chance there is of mistakes coming from the car ahead. Humphries, by the way, just set the outright fastest speed in the Sector 3 speed trap of 139 miles an hour. It's the first speed trap down the Hangar Straight, though, that is the fastest part of the circuit, where they're up in the 145 to 146 mile per hour bracket. Now a 5-second penalty for 27, Ian Humphries. So that's Ian Humphries then chasing down Ambrogio Perfetti, has exceeded track limits once too often, and he's being given a 5-second penalty. So that's a shame. It robs us really of that battle. I mean, the battle will still happen, but it matters a little bit less now. Perfetti could almost let Humphries go. He won't, but he could let him go and just stay within 5 seconds of him to get the victory. But we know that's not how Ambrogio Perfetti works, is it? Screeching of tyres there as he understeers wide. It's a horrible sound, that, isn't it? The sound of a car understeering. Front wheels chattering across the road. You just feel, you can almost hear the tyres shredding as they understeer out. That's why we get all these marbles on the edge of the road, chunks of rubber get streaming across the edge of the track. So this 5-second penalty for Humphries actually isn't going to cost him a place at the moment, because they're 13 seconds ahead of Nigel Rice. So Humphries, although it's going to potentially cost him a shot at the victory, it won't affect his second place. And of course, it's still worth him pushing here. If he can force a big mistake out of Perfetti, if Perfetti were to go off or spin or something, then Humphries could get 5 seconds ahead of him, and then he'd win the race anyway. Looks like it's going to be a double victory now, though, doesn't it, for Theo Edgerton? Sorry, for Ambrogio Perfetti in the AM class. Edgerton, of course, did not win the first race, won it on the road. Jack Bartholomew inherited it after the flag, and we go on to the last lap of the race now. 50 seconds left on the clock. What is the lead gap going on to that final lap? It's going to be 3.5 seconds between Theo Edgerton and Jack Bartholomew. So Bartholomew won his first ever race in the championship last time at Brands Hatch, then won the very next race this morning at Silverstone. It's not going to be a victory this time, just the 2 victories for him then in a row. Edgerton will take his 3rd win of the year, and Edgerton has never finished worse than 2nd in the race, 2nd in any of the races this year. And in fact, in one of those, he set the fastest lap and got himself an extra couple of points. You get 10 points for a win, 8 for 2nd, then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But you get bonus points for pole positions and fastest lap. Pole positions in race 1, and fastest laps in both races. Fastest lap and pole position in the previous race, though, went to Bartholomew, who then, of course, got the victory as well after the time penalty for Edgerton. But no such issues here, it would seem. We've not had a message that he's been warned for track limits, although we didn't get one for Humphries either, and then he ended up getting a penalty. So Theo Edgerton then, half a lap to go before he claims his 4th victory of the season. Through Abbey Corner, Farm, the left-hander, bit of a nothing corner really. You've just got to try and position yourself into Village and get that braking point right. Difficult braking point to spot though sometimes. You can't quite see the apex either. You go over quite a rise in the braking point. We turn into the right-hander. There's Bartholomew. He'll still be happy, I think, with these results. Bear in mind, his season opener, he only managed a 4th in race 1 and then a 2nd in race 2, and then a non-finish in the first race at Brands Hatch. So at least he's put 2 good races together here. A win and a 2nd place will be very nice indeed, and he'll still get a couple of points out of Edgerton over the weekend because of that pole position fastest lap from race 1. But in this one, every lap of the race has been led by Theo Edgerton, and he set the fastest lap as well. It's going to be win number 4 of the season in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. For Theo Edgerton, he wins the 2nd race here at Silverstone by a fairly comfortable margin as well, over Jack Bartholomew in 2nd. Ethan Hawkey, a pretty lonely weekend really, didn't have anyone to play with in that race at all after Charles Clark's lap on DNF. Ambrogio Perfetti will hang on to win the AM class on the road and in reality as well, because Ian Humphries, had he got past him, there might have been a change then with the penalty, but Humphries, with his 5-second penalty, will still stay in 2nd place. Nigel Rice should come home in 3rd, and then this battle, Alexei Maliakin has been trying to catch Charles March, but it's not going to happen. March will hang on, and then there, Carl Cavers will be just outside the top 5 in the AM class. Last of the finishers, Pete Chambers, long way back in the end for him though, did not have a brilliant race. But Theo Edgerton did, and he this time will get to keep the victory. No late penalty for him this time, and extend his points lead, which stood at 16 points coming into that race. It'll go up by another 3, won't it, then, to 19 points now. Bartholomew will stay second, and yeah, there'll be no change in the championship standings in Pro. Armstrong and Clark, who came together in the earlier race, at the start of the race, were only 2 points apart. So for fourth in the championship, that's unfortunately ended in a collision. Edgerton the winner then, Bartholomew second, Hawkey third, Perfetti fourth, wins the AM category, Ian Humphries fifth, was second in the AM class, and Nigel Rice was third. Then it was Charles March, Alexei Malikin, Carl Cavers, Pete Chambers, whilst Matthew Armstrong and Charles Clark retired after their lap 1 collision. So the final race of the weekend is complete then here at Silverstone. The Porsches will be back again for their next event at Alton Park, which I think is on the BTCC bill. Then they'll be at Thruxton later in the year, and Donington Park. They are actually now halfway through the season. It's only a 12-race championship, so that race did mark the halfway point of the 2021 campaign. Drivers will head back to the paddock, up onto the podium for those that scored podium positions. And Theo Edgerton then from second on the grid, bringing home his 4th victory. It was all about the start, really. He got into turn 1 ahead of Jack Bartholomew. Nothing that Jack could do, really, to stop him on the run into that first corner. There was almost a little bit of a brush as Bartholomew desperately tried to close the door, and then tried to close the door on Ethan Hawkey, who was trying to get past him for second. They stayed in that order through the first corner, and from there the gaps really started to just grow and grow. The big drama in the race was that lap 1 contact between Matthew Armstrong and Charles Clark that put both of the drivers out of the race. Clark on the spot, Armstrong limped back to the pit lane but never returned to the action. Bartholomew in the early stages did look a little bit under pressure. Perhaps tyre pressures were a little bit low, and he had a lot of company from Ethan Hawkey, who at one point was fully up the inside into the loop but didn't manage to complete the pass. Ambrogio Perfetti, though, would eventually complete a pass against Ian Humphries to take the AM class lead. He tried it coming out of Luffield, then made a real dive on the inside at the loop and slid through on the inside line. Perfetti took the lead, Humphries dropped to second and eventually dropped to 6.4 seconds back. It was a dominant victory in the end then for Ambrogio Perfetti. Bit of mid-race rain threatened to cause a bit of drama. Bartholomew was chasing after the race leader but couldn't get there. Edgerton was giving it absolutely everything that he had as he tried to build a margin. There was a battle then between Alexei Malikin and Carl Cavers, who lost 5th place to Malikin about 2/3 of the way through the race, but no one could keep up with Theo Edgerton, having lost the first race of the weekend due to a post-race penalty, or a late race penalty. He manages to win this one on the road and keep it as well, winning by 3.4 seconds, whilst in the AM category it was Ambrogio Perfetti that won, from Ian Humphries second, and Nigel Rice to round out the podium. So, great racing then, as ever, from the championship here at Silverstone. They'll be back, as I said, at Alton Park in a few weeks' time. But that is all we have time for here at Silverstone. Thank you, everyone that's joined us for not only the Porsche races, but all the racing throughout the course of the day. We'll see you again next time.